Emma Daniels thought she was about to start the perfect life. Minutes before walking down the aisle to marry William Spencer, a powerful millionaire, she receives the phone call that changes everything. He's not coming. Devastated and abandoned, Emma discovers she's pregnant, not with one child, but four. Alone, she builds a life far from the luxury she once knew, raising her sons in a small, loving home. But when William reappears years later, his eyes filled with regret and determination, Emma's world is shaken once again. He wants to be part of their children's lives, but can she trust the man who left her so easily? As a brutal custody battle ensues, Emma is forced to confront not just William, but also his fiancée Vivian, a woman who sees Emma's children as pawns in a dangerous game. With secrets that could ruin William's empire, Emma must decide whether to risk everything to protect her sons, or let William back into their lives, knowing it could break all their hearts. Can Emma fight against the powerful forces pulling at her family, or will she be swept away once again? Emma Daniels stood before the full-length mirror, her wedding gown shimmering under the soft lighting of the bridal suite. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the lace veil for what felt like the 100th time. Everything around her, the flowers, the dress, the golden light streaming through the windows, was perfect. She should have been ecstatic, but a knot of nervous energy twisted inside her. Her maid of honor, Jessica, entered the room, beaming. "Emma, you look breathtaking. William's a lucky man." Emma smiled, but before she could respond, her phone rang. Glancing at the screen, she saw William's name. Her heart fluttered. Maybe he was just checking in, nervous like her. "Hello," she answered, her voice soft. There was a pause, a long, heavy silence. "Emma." William's voice was distant, cold. "I'm not coming." The words hit her like a physical blow. Her throat tightened. "What? William, what do you mean?" "I can't do this," he said, his tone emotionless. "I need to focus on the company. I thought I could handle this, but I can't." Tears stung Emma's eyes. "But we're getting married in 30 minutes, William. Everyone's here. What about us? You'll understand someday." "I'm sorry." The line went dead. The phone slipped from Emma's fingers and crashed onto the floor. Her chest tightened, making it hard to breathe. She stared at her reflection. Once a radiant bride-to-be, now a woman with no future. The veil suddenly felt like a suffocating weight. She yanked it off and flung it to the ground. This couldn't be happening. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The room that had once felt like the setting for a fairy tale now seemed cold and empty. The phone calls from her friends, the whispered condolences, they all blurred together. Jessica sat beside her, eyes wide with disbelief. "How could he do this to you? After everything?" Jessica fumed, her voice trembling with anger. "I don't know," Emma whispered, her throat raw from crying. "I thought I knew him. I thought I knew us." Outside, the media was already swirling with the news. Headlines screamed of William Spencer's last-minute decision to abandon his bride. Photographers were camped outside, eager to capture every detail of the broken engagement. "I can't stay here," Emma said suddenly, standing up. "I need to get out of here." Jessica blinked. "Where will you go?" "I don't know. But I can't stay here, waiting for someone who isn't coming." With shaky hands, Emma packed her things. She left behind the gown, the flowers, the life she had imagined with William. She needed to disappear, to escape the constant reminder of what should have been. It had been a month since that fateful day, and Emma was trying to adjust to her new life in a small, run-down apartment far from the opulence she once knew. The media attention had died down, but the whispers followed her everywhere. She stood in her tiny bathroom, staring at the pregnancy test in her trembling hands. 2 lines. Positive. Her heart dropped into her stomach. Pregnant? This couldn't be happening. Not now. She sank to the floor, her mind racing. She hadn't spoken to William since the day he left her. He didn't deserve to know. But as the days passed, the shock gave way to something else. She placed her hand on her belly, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I'll take care of you," she whispered. "I'll figure this out." A few weeks later, a doctor confirmed what seemed impossible: quadruplets. For babies. The enormity of it all was overwhelming. Emma sat in the doctor's office, her hands trembling as she cradled her belly. How could she do this alone? 6 months later, Emma had settled into a rhythm. Her belly had grown, rounding out in a way that both scared and amazed her. Every kick from inside reminded her that life was still moving forward, no matter how much she wished things had turned out differently. Her small apartment was cluttered with baby clothes, tiny cribs, and a mess of supplies. She worked 2 jobs, one during the day and freelance work at night, to prepare for the arrival of her children. Her hands were rough, her back ached, but she had never been more determined. One evening, as she folded yet another stack of baby clothes, her phone buzzed. It was Jessica. "How are you feeling?" Jessica's voice was filled with concern. "Exhausted," Emma admitted, sinking into the couch. "But I'm getting through. I have to. You're amazing. You know that? You're going to be a great mom." Emma smiled, though her heart ached with uncertainty. "I hope so. I just wish," she trailed off, unwilling to voice the one name that haunted her thoughts, William. But she pushed it away. She had chosen this path, and she would walk it alone. It was a warm spring afternoon when Emma decided to take the boys, Eli, Finn, Luke, and Miles, to the park. The quadruplets, now toddlers, were full of life and energy. Their giggles filled the air as they chased each other around the swings. For a brief moment, Emma felt a sense of peace. This was her family, her world. But then, a familiar prickle of awareness crept up her spine. She turned and froze. Standing a few feet away, staring at the boys with wide, shocked eyes, was William. Her heart leapt into her throat. He looked older, sharper. His tailored suit immaculate, his blonde hair swept back. His eyes, though, were the same piercing blue she had once loved. "Emma," he murmured, stepping forward. She instinctively moved in front of the boys, her pulse quickening. "What are you doing here?" Her voice trembled with a mixture of anger and fear. William's gaze shifted from her to the boys, his face paling as realization dawned on him. "Are they?" "They're not yours," Emma lied, the words spilling out before she could stop them. But William wasn't fooled. His eyes darted between her and the children, taking in every detail, their blonde hair, their blue eyes. "I need to know," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Are they mine?" Emma lifted her chin, fighting to keep her expression calm. "It doesn't matter, William. You made your choice years ago. We don't need you." She called out to the boys, gathering them close to her, her heart pounding in her chest. As she turned to leave, she glanced back over her shoulder. William stood frozen, his eyes locked on his son's. And in that moment, she knew this was just the beginning. Emma's hands shook as she locked the front door, the events of the park replaying in her mind. The image of William staring at the boys with disbelief was burned into her memory. She had lied, told him they weren't his, but the look in his eyes said he knew the truth. And that truth was about to upend everything. Her phone buzzed on the counter, startling her. She reached for it, her heart pounding. It was Jessica. "Emma, how are you holding up?" Jessica's voice was filled with concern. "I'm not sure," Emma admitted, running her fingers through her hair. "I told him they weren't his, but I don't think he believes me. What are you going to do if he tries to get involved?" "I don't know. I've built a life without him, without his help. He doesn't get to just walk back in and claim a place in their lives." As Emma spoke, a firm knock echoed through the apartment. She glanced at the door, her heart sinking. "Jess, I've got to go. I think he's here." Hanging up the phone, Emma cautiously approached the door, her chest tightening with every step. She opened it slowly, revealing William standing on her doorstep, his expression stern but pleading. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low but firm. Emma swallowed hard. "There's nothing to talk about." "You know that's not true," William countered, stepping forward. "I need to know the truth, Emma. Are they mine?" Her stomach clenched. She could see the desperation in his eyes, but there was also a hardness there, a determination that made her wary. "Why now, William? Why after all these years?" "Because I didn't know," he shot back, his frustration seeping through. "If I had known, things would have been different." Emma laughed bitterly. Different? You abandoned me on our wedding day. You left me with nothing, William. Do you really think I believe you would have stayed if you knew I was pregnant? William's jaw tightened, and for a moment, he said nothing. Then, softly, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I want to know them. Emma stared at him, torn between anger and something else, a deep, aching fear of losing the life she had fought so hard to build. They're mine, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But that doesn't mean you get to be a part of their lives. William's face hardened. I'm their father, Emma. Whether you like it or not, I'm going to be involved. She took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. Get out. Without another word, William turned and walked away, but Emma knew this wasn't over. It had been 2 days since William's visit, and Emma hadn't been able to shake the feeling of impending doom. She had hoped, prayed, that he would let it go, but deep down, she knew better. She was feeding the boys breakfast when the doorbell rang. Glancing at the clock, she frowned. It was too early for visitors. Stay here, she told the boys, wiping her hands on a towel as she walked to the door. When she opened it, a man in a suit stood on the doorstep, holding an envelope. Emma Daniels? He asked. Yes? You've been served, he said, handing her the envelope before turning and walking away. Emma stared down at the papers in her hands, her breath catching in her throat. Her hands trembled as she ripped the envelope open, her eyes scanning the words, petition for custody. No, she whispered, her heart racing. William was suing for custody. She collapsed onto the couch, her mind spinning. How could this be happening? She had done everything on her own, raised these boys without him. He didn't deserve to be in their lives. He had no right. Her phone rang, breaking through her daze. She fumbled to answer it, her voice shaky as she spoke. Jess? What's wrong? He's suing for custody. What? Jessica's voice was sharp with disbelief. He can't do that. He is, Emma replied, her voice cracking. I don't know what to do. You need to get a lawyer, Emma. You're going to have to fight him. Emma swallowed hard, staring down at the legal papers in her lap. She had fought for everything in her life, her independence, her children, her peace. But now, she was going to have to fight for something far more precious. The courtroom felt cold, sterile. Emma sat at the long table beside her lawyer, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Across from her, William sat with his legal team, looking calm and collected. But Emma knew better. He was as nervous as she was. Ms. Daniels, Mr. Spencer, we're here today to discuss the custody of your 4 children, the judge began, her voice stern and measured. Mr. Spencer has filed for joint custody, claiming he was unaware of the children's existence until recently. Ms. Daniels, you have contested this petition. Is that correct? Emma nodded, her throat tight. Yes, Your Honor. William's lawyer stood, adjusting his glasses. Your Honor, Mr. Spencer has every right to be a part of his children's lives. He was unaware of their existence due to Ms. Daniels' decision to withhold this information from him. Since learning the truth, Mr. Spencer has made every effort to establish a relationship with his children. Emma's lawyer shot to his feet. Your Honor, Ms. Daniels has raised these boys on her own for the past 4 years. Mr. Spencer abandoned her and their family before they were even born. His sudden interest in their lives is not based on genuine care, but rather a desire to control the situation. William's eyes flicked to Emma, a flash of something unreadable crossing his face. She looked away, her heart hammering in her chest. The judge cleared her throat, silencing both sides. I will hear from both parties. Ms. Daniels, you may begin. Emma took a deep breath and stood. She felt the weight of everyone's eyes on her, but she forced herself to focus on the judge. Your Honor, I've done everything for these boys. I've provided for them, cared for them, loved them. William wasn't there when I needed him the most. He didn't want to be part of our lives then, and I don't believe he truly wants to be part of their lives now. Her voice wavered, but she continued. I'm not trying to keep them from him, but I'm afraid that he'll hurt them the way he hurt me. The courtroom was silent. Emma's lawyer placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder as she sat down, her hands shaking. The judge nodded slowly, her gaze shifting to William. Mr. Spencer, I will hear from you. William stood, his tall frame exuding confidence, but his voice was softer than Emma had expected. Your Honor, I made a mistake years ago. A terrible mistake. But that doesn't mean I should be kept from my children. I didn't know about them. If I had, I would have been there. I'm not asking to take them away from their mother. I just want a chance to know them, to be their father. His words hung in the air, and Emma felt her resolve begin to waver. Could he really be sincere? After the hearing adjourned, Emma gathered her things, her mind still racing with everything that had been said. She was about to leave when a sharp voice cut through the quiet. Well, that was quite the performance. Emma turned, and there, standing by the courtroom doors, was a woman she hadn't seen before. Tall, with sleek black hair and icy blue eyes, the woman regarded Emma with thinly veiled contempt. I'm sorry, who are you? Emma asked, her tone wary. I'm Vivian Stone, the woman said, stepping closer. William's fiancée. Emma's stomach dropped. Of course, this woman was everything she had feared. A polished, perfect replacement for the life Emma had once imagined for herself. Vivian's smile was cold as she spoke again. I just wanted to introduce myself. I'll be seeing more of you, I'm sure. Once William wins this case, Emma's chest tightened, but she refused to be intimidated. Don't count on it. Vivian laughed, a sharp, hollow sound. Oh, Emma, you're out of your league. William is going to win, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Emma glared at her, her fists clenching at her sides. We'll see. Emma stormed out of the courthouse, her mind racing. Vivian's words echoed in her head. You're out of your league. No, she couldn't let them win. She wouldn't. Jessica was waiting for her outside, her expression filled with concern. What happened in there? Vivian happened, Emma muttered, shaking her head. William's fiancée. She made it clear that they're going to fight for full custody. Jessica's eyes widened. What? They can't do that. They're going to try, Emma said, her voice trembling. I can feel it. As they walked away from the courthouse, Emma felt the weight of the coming battle settle heavily on her shoulders. It was no longer just about William. It was about a woman who wanted to take everything Emma had fought so hard to protect. And the fight was just beginning. Emma sat in her lawyer's office, staring at the legal documents spread across the polished wooden table. Every word seemed to blur together as the enormity of what was happening sank in. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about her boys. Her lawyer, Michael, cleared his throat, snapping her out of her daze. Emma, we need to be prepared. William has resources, and now that Vivian's involved, this is going to be a fight. Emma clenched her fists in her lap. I don't care how much money they have. They can't just take my boys from me. Michael leaned forward, his expression calm but serious. I know you're doing everything you can, and I believe in you. But the courts will look at everything, your financial situation, your living conditions, even your emotional stability. We need to make sure there are no gaps for them to exploit. Emotional stability? Emma scoffed. They're the ones turning my life upside down, and I'm supposed to stay calm? Michael offered a sympathetic smile. I know it's hard, but they'll use anything they can to prove you're unfit. Emma's heart pounded as she realized how much was at stake. The boys were her entire world, and the thought of losing them made her physically ill. What do we do next? First, we gather evidence, Michael explained. Every doctor's appointment, every report card from preschool, anything that shows you've been a stable and caring parent. We need to prove that the boys are thriving under your care. Emma nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. I'll do whatever it takes. A few days later, Emma watched from the window as William's car pulled up in front of her apartment. Her stomach twisted into knots as the boys scrambled around her, unaware of the tension building in the air. Eli, the most curious of her sons, ran to the door, his excitement barely contained. Is that Daddy? He asked, his wide blue eyes shining with curiosity. Emma hesitated, then forced a smile. Yes, it is, sweetie. But remember, this is new for all of us, okay? She opened the door to find William standing there, his expression somewhere between nervous and hopeful. He smiled when he saw the boys, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Emma stepped aside to let him in, watching closely as he knelt down to their level. "Hey, guys," William said, his voice soft but uncertain. "How are you?" Luke, the most adventurous of the boys, looked up at him with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Are you staying?" William glanced up at Emma, his eyes searching hers for guidance, but she didn't offer any help. She crossed her arms, keeping her distance. This was his moment. "No, buddy, I'm not staying," William explained gently, "but I'll be coming by to visit more often. Would you like that?" The boys exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. Finn, the shyest of the four, clung to Emma's leg, not saying a word. William's shoulders slumped slightly as he stood up, the weight of their discomfort evident on his face. Emma felt a pang of guilt, but she quickly pushed it away. This was his doing, not hers. He had to earn their trust, just as he had to earn hers. William's visits became more regular over the next few weeks, but it wasn't long before Vivian made her presence known. One afternoon, while William was visiting with the boys in the living room, a knock on the door interrupted their time together. Emma opened it to find Vivian standing there, her icy blue eyes scanning the modest apartment with barely concealed disdain. "I hope I'm not intruding," Vivian said, her tone making it clear that she didn't care if she was. Emma stiffened. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see how William was doing with the boys," Vivian replied, brushing past Emma and stepping inside as if she owned the place. The boys, who had been playing with their toys, grew quiet, sensing the tension in the room. Eli looked up at Vivian, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Who's she?" he asked, his innocent question hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Vivian smiled down at him, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm a friend of your dad's, sweetie." Emma clenched her fists, her protective instincts flaring. She stepped forward, placing herself between Vivian and the boys. "This isn't your place, Vivian." Vivian raised an eyebrow. "I'm part of William's life now, Emma. That means I'm part of theirs too." "Not yet, you're not," Emma shot back. "And as long as they're under my roof, I decide who's part of their lives." William stood up, trying to defuse the situation. "Vivian, maybe we should—" "No," Vivian interrupted, her voice sharp. "We're a team, William. These boys need to get used to that." Emma's heart raced, her pulse pounding in her ears. "The boys are confused enough as it is without you complicating things. They deserve to know their father." "Emma," Vivian countered. "And I'm not going anywhere." The room was thick with tension, and Emma could feel the weight of her emotions pressing down on her. She turned to William, her voice barely controlled. "You need to take her out of here. Now." William hesitated for a moment, but the look in Emma's eyes was enough to convince him. He gently placed a hand on Vivian's arm and guided her toward the door. "Let's go," he muttered. Vivian's parting words stung as she left. "You can't keep me out of their lives forever." The next court hearing came sooner than Emma had anticipated. As she sat in the courtroom, her nerves on edge, she knew this was her chance to show the judge just how much the boys meant to her. Michael stood beside her, offering a reassuring smile. "You've got this, Emma. Just speak from the heart." When the judge called her to the stand, Emma took a deep breath and walked forward, her legs feeling like they might give out beneath her. She sat down and met the judge's gaze, determined not to show weakness. "Ms. Daniels," the judge began, "please tell the court about your role in your children's lives." Emma swallowed hard, her throat dry, but she pushed through the fear. "Your Honor, I've raised these boys on my own from the moment I found out I was pregnant. I've been there for every milestone, their first steps, their first words. I work 2 jobs to provide for them, and I do everything I can to give them a stable, loving home." Her voice trembled as she continued. "They've never known their father, and now he wants to be part of their lives. But I'm afraid. I'm afraid of what it will do to them if he comes and goes, or if he can't handle the responsibility." She paused, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "All I want is what's best for them. They deserve to be happy and loved, and I've done everything I can to make sure of that." When she finished, the courtroom was silent. Emma's lawyer gave her a nod of approval as she returned to her seat, her heart pounding in her chest. After the hearing, Emma found herself outside the courthouse, staring at the steps that led back to her life. She felt exhausted, emotionally drained, but the fight was far from over. Emma, a voice called from behind her. She turned to see William walking toward her, his hands shoved into his pockets, his expression tense. He stopped a few feet away, uncertainty flickering in his blue eyes. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry," William said quietly. Emma crossed her arms, unsure of what to make of his sudden apology. "For what?" "For everything," he admitted. "For leaving you, for not being there. I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to try and make things right." Emma stared at him, her heart torn between anger and the faintest glimmer of hope. "Why now, William? Why are you doing this?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Because I realize how much I've missed. And because I see now what I should have seen back then. You're an incredible mother. The boys are lucky to have you." Her throat tightened at his words, but she wasn't ready to let her guard down. "It's not just about them, is it?" William hesitated, then shook his head. "No, it's not. I made a mistake, Emma. A huge one. And I'm trying to fix it." Emma held his gaze, her emotions swirling inside her. She didn't know if she could trust him again, but for the first time, she saw a crack in his armor, a glimpse of the man he used to be. "Fixing it won't be easy," she said softly. "I know," William replied, "but I'm willing to try." Emma sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the court documents that had been sent by her lawyer. She'd been going over every word, every phrase, trying to find some crack in William's legal case. But the weight of it all was beginning to wear her down. She rubbed her temples, feeling the familiar stress headache begin to form. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Michael, her lawyer. "Emma, we need to meet tomorrow. There's something you need to know about Vivian." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She immediately typed back, "What is it?" The response came quickly. "It's better if we discuss in person, but it's important. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Emma's mind raced with possibilities. What could he have discovered about Vivian that was so urgent? The next morning, Emma sat in Michael's office, her hands fidgeting with her purse strap as she waited for him to speak. Michael sat across from her, a serious expression on his face. "What is it?" Emma asked, her voice tight with anxiety. Michael sighed and leaned forward. "I've been digging into Vivian's background, and I found some things that might change the way we approach this case." Emma's stomach churned. "What do you mean?" "Vivian has been manipulating William from the start," Michael explained. "She's the one who pushed him to file for full custody. It turns out that William's business is in serious trouble, and his lawyer suggested that presenting himself as a family man might save his reputation and his company." Emma's eyes widened in shock. "So, this isn't even about the boys? It's about his company?" Michael nodded grimly. "I believe so. Vivian has a lot to gain from this. If William's business survives, she gets to keep her luxurious lifestyle. She's been using this custody battle to secure her own future." Emma felt a surge of anger rise in her chest. "I knew she was manipulative, but this? She's using my children as pawns." Michael's gaze softened. "I know this is hard, but we can use this to our advantage. If we can prove that Vivian is influencing William's decisions, it could help your case." Emma nodded, her mind racing. "I need to talk to William. He needs to know what she's doing." Later that afternoon, Emma met William at a small cafe near the courthouse. She had asked to meet him alone, without their lawyers present. As she sat across from him, she studied his face. There were shadows under his eyes, and he looked more tired than usual. "Why did you want to meet?" William asked, his tone cautious. "I know about Vivian," Emma said, cutting straight to the point. William blinked, clearly taken aback. "What about her?" "I know that she's been manipulating you," Emma continued. "She's using this custody battle to secure her position in your life and in your company." "Did you know that?" William's expression tightened. "Vivian wouldn't do that." "Yes, she would," Emma said firmly. "She's the one who pushed you to fight for full custody, isn't she?" William opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. The truth was written all over his face. She's using you, William, Emma pressed. This isn't about the boys. This is about her and her desire for control. William's jaw clenched, and for a moment, he looked as though he might deny it. But then his shoulders sagged, and he ran a hand through his hair. I didn't want it to be like this, he admitted quietly. But my company, it's in trouble. I thought this could help fix things. Emma's heart ached with frustration and disbelief. And you thought using our children as a PR move was the answer? I didn't see it that way, William said, his voice pained. I'm trying to fix everything. Before Emma could respond, the door to the cafe swung open, and Vivian walked in, her icy gaze landing on them immediately. She strode over to the table, her presence commanding as always. What's going on? Vivian demanded, her sharp eyes darting between Emma and William. We're talking, Emma replied, her voice cold. Vivian's lips curled into a sneer. About what, exactly? About you, Emma said, standing her ground. About how you've been manipulating William for your own gain. Vivian's expression darkened, but she quickly composed herself. William, don't listen to her. She's just trying to turn you against me. But William didn't respond. He stared down at his hands, his silence speaking volumes. Vivian's eyes flashed with anger. We're a team, William. We're doing this for you. For your future. Emma couldn't stand it anymore. This isn't about him, and it's certainly not about the boys. This is about you and your need for control. Vivian took a step closer to William, her voice low and dangerous. You need to decide, William. Are you with me, or are you going to let her ruin everything? The tension in the air was palpable. Emma held her breath, waiting for William's response. That evening, Emma returned home feeling emotionally drained. She had confronted William and exposed Vivian's true colors, but the fight wasn't over. She still had to protect her boys from the fallout of this custody battle. As she tucked the boys into bed, Eli, the oldest of the quadruplets, looked up at her with wide eyes. Mommy, why is Daddy always so mad? Emma's heart clenched at his innocent question. She sat down on the edge of his bed, brushing a hand through his sandy blonde hair. Daddy's not mad, sweetheart. He's just confused. Is it because of that lady? Eli asked, his voice soft. Emma's chest tightened. She knew he was talking about Vivian. Yes, honey, but you don't have to worry about her. I'm here, and I'll always be here. Eli's brow furrowed as he thought it over. I don't like her. Emma pressed a kiss to his forehead. You don't have to, sweetie. Just remember, I'll always protect you. As she sat there, holding her son close, Emma realized how much this custody battle was affecting them. They were too young to fully understand what was happening, but they could sense the tension between her and William. It wasn't fair to them, and it wasn't the life she wanted for them. Something had to change. 2 days later, Emma received a phone call from William. His voice was tense, and he asked to meet her again. Reluctantly, she agreed. They met in the same cafe, but this time, William was alone. He looked even more exhausted than before, his usual confident demeanor shattered. Vivian gave me an ultimatum, William said, his voice hollow. She told me I have to choose, her or the boys. Emma's breath caught in her throat. What did you say? I didn't answer, William admitted, running a hand over his face. I don't know what to do, Emma. I love Vivian, but I love the boys too. I never wanted it to come to this. Emma's heart softened for a moment, but she couldn't ignore the damage that had already been done. You need to make a decision, William. You can't have both. William's eyes were filled with pain as he looked at her. I know. I just don't know if I'm strong enough. Emma leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. You are strong enough. But you have to do what's right, for the boys. They deserve better than to be caught in the middle of this. William stared down at the table, his hands trembling slightly. I don't want to lose them. Then fight for them, Emma said quietly. But not for her. Not for your company. Fight for them because they're your children, and they need you. As Emma walked back to her apartment that evening, she felt a new sense of resolve wash over her. She had done everything she could to protect her boys, and now it was up to William to decide if he would do the same. When she opened the door, The boys ran to greet her, their laughter filling the small space. She scooped them up in her arms, their bright eyes and innocent smiles reminding her of why she was fighting so hard. No matter what happened, she knew one thing for sure. She would never let anyone take them away from her. Not William. Not Vivian. No one. She had built this life for them. This small, loving home. And she would fight with everything she had to keep it. The courtroom was thick with tension as Emma sat next to Michael, her lawyer. Her hands trembled slightly in her lap, though she tried to appear calm and collected. This was it, the final hearing. After months of battling William and Vivian, this moment would decide the future of her family. Across from her, William sat with his lawyer, looking somber and tired. He hadn't even glanced her way when he walked in, but Emma didn't care. Her focus was on the judge, who was reviewing the final arguments from both sides. Vivian wasn't there. Her absence was telling. William's fiancée had slowly pulled back from the fight as cracks in her motives had been exposed. But that didn't mean the fight was over. All rise, the bailiff called, and the judge entered the room. Emma stood, her heart pounding as the judge took her seat and adjusted her glasses. This has been a long and difficult case, the judge began, her voice steady but firm. Both sides have presented compelling arguments regarding the well-being of the children involved. Emma held her breath, glancing at William. His face was unreadable, though she could see the tightness in his jaw. The judge continued, "The decision I make today is not about punishing one parent or rewarding another. It is about what is best for the children. I have considered the evidence, the testimonies, and the welfare of these young boys." Emma's pulse quickened. This was it. "Ms. Daniels," the judge addressed her directly, "you have shown an extraordinary commitment to raising your children under difficult circumstances. You have been their primary caregiver, and it is clear that they are loved and well cared for in your home." Emma exhaled, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. The judge turned to William. "Mr. Spencer, while I believe you have a sincere desire to be involved in your children's lives, it is also evident that your motivations were, at times, influenced by external factors. That said, I do believe you should have a relationship with your children moving forward." Emma's heart raced as the judge paused. "It is my ruling that Ms. Daniels will retain primary custody of the children," the judge declared. "Mr. Spencer will have scheduled visitation rights, starting with supervised visits and, depending on the children's comfort and adjustment, leading to unsupervised weekend visits." Emma's breath caught in her throat. She had one. Relief and exhaustion swept over her all at once. "This case is adjourned," the judge said, banging her gavel. Emma sat back in her chair, feeling both light and heavy at the same time. It was over, but the battle had left scars that would take time to heal. As the courtroom emptied, Emma lingered in her seat, processing the verdict. Michael patted her shoulder gently. "You did it," he said softly. But Emma couldn't shake the weight of everything that had happened. She had won custody, but her children's father was still in their lives, and that meant their future was still uncertain. As she stood to leave, William approached her. His face was weary, the confident mask he once wore nowhere to be seen. "Emma," he said quietly, "I'm sorry." Emma turned to face him, her heart conflicted. "For what?" "For everything," William admitted, his voice raw with emotion. "For leaving you. For not being there when I should have been. For letting this whole thing get out of hand." Emma didn't respond immediately. She had imagined this moment so many times, him apologizing, her feeling vindicated. But now that it was happening, she just felt tired. "You didn't just hurt me, William," she said softly. "You hurt them, and you almost took them from me." "I know," William whispered, his gaze falling to the floor. "I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now that I wasn't. Vivian," he shook his head, his voice trembling slightly. "She made me believe this was the only way." "Vivian's gone, isn't she?" Emma asked, already knowing the answer. William nodded. "She left. I didn't choose her, and she couldn't handle it." Emma sighed, her anger softening as she looked at the man who had once been her whole world. "It's not about her, William. It's about our boys. They need you, but they need you to be there for the right reasons." William's eyes were filled with regret as he met her gaze. "I will be. I promise. Vivian's absence from the final hearing hadn't gone unnoticed. Her grip on William had weakened, and with the judge's ruling, her influence was effectively shattered. In the days leading up to the verdict, Emma had learned that Vivian had tried to manipulate the situation for her own gain. When the truth came out, that Vivian had pushed William into the custody battle as a way to salvage his crumbling business, it had backfired. The judge had seen right through her. Now, as Emma left the courthouse, she couldn't help but think of Vivian. The woman had stormed out of William's life, furious that her plans had been ruined. But Emma wasn't worried about her anymore. Vivian had shown her true colors, and in the end, she had only pushed William further away. The days following the judge's ruling were a whirlwind of emotions for Emma. She had won, but the victory felt bittersweet. The boys were still adjusting to the idea of having their father in their lives, and Emma was trying to navigate the new normal. One evening, as she tucked the boys into bed, Eli looked up at her with wide eyes. "Mommy, is Daddy coming back tomorrow?" Emma smiled gently, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "No, sweetie. Daddy will see you on the weekend, remember?" Eli nodded, his small brow furrowed in thought. "I like it when he comes, but I like it better when you're with us." Emma's heart squeezed, and she pressed a kiss to his forehead. "I'll always be with you, Eli. Always." As she left their room, she felt the weight of the responsibility she carried. She had won custody, but this was only the beginning of a long road ahead. A few weeks later, Emma stood by the window, watching as William pulled up to the curb. He had come to say goodbye to the boys before their first supervised visit, and though Emma still felt hesitant about the whole arrangement, she knew this was part of the process. William got out of the car and walked up to the door, his posture more relaxed than it had been in months. When Emma opened the door, there was a quiet understanding between them. No words were needed. He knelt down as the boys rushed to him, wrapping their small arms around his neck. "I'll see you soon," William said, his voice filled with warmth. "I promise." As he stood to leave, he glanced at Emma. "Thank you," he said quietly. Emma nodded, her heart still guarded but softened by his sincerity. "Just be there for them, William. That's all that matters." "I will," he replied before turning to leave. As Emma closed the door behind him, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. The battle was over, and while the scars remained, she knew she had done everything she could to protect her boys. This was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where her family could finally start to heal. It had been several months since the final court ruling, and Emma was finally starting to feel a sense of normalcy. The boys were adjusting to their new routine, spending weekends with William, and while it hadn't been easy, the worst was behind them. Emma sat at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee and watching as Eli, Finn, Luke, and Miles played together in the living room. Their laughter filled the small apartment, a reminder of how far they had all come. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. She opened it to find William standing there, smiling a little awkwardly. "Hey," he said, his voice soft. "Hey," Emma replied, stepping aside to let him in. He was here to pick the boys up for their weekend visit. As William knelt to greet the boys, Emma couldn't help but notice how much had changed between them. The tension, the anger, it had all begun to fade. He was trying, and she could see that. More importantly, the boys were starting to look forward to his visits. That was all that mattered. "How's everything going?" William asked as he stood up, looking at her with a genuine expression. "It's going well," Emma said, offering a small smile. "The boys seem happy." "They are," William agreed. He hesitated for a moment, then added, "I know I've said it before, but thank you for giving me the chance to be a part of their lives." Emma nodded. "They need you. But more than that, they need stability." "I'm working on it," William replied, and this time, Emma believed him. As William took the boys for the weekend, Emma spent her Saturday catching up on work. She had opened her own marketing firm a few months earlier, and the business was slowly starting to take off. It was her first taste of true independence, something she had worked so hard to achieve. On Sunday evening, when William brought the boys back home, Emma noticed a change in them. Finn, the shyest of the group, seemed more talkative than usual, excitedly telling her about the time they'd spent at the park. "Daddy took us to see a baseball game," Finn exclaimed, his eyes lighting up. Can we go with him next time? Emma's heart clenched slightly, but she forced a smile. Of course, sweetie. I'm glad you had fun. As the boys ran off to play, William lingered by the door. They're really starting to open up to me, he said, his voice filled with hope. Emma nodded, her emotions mixed. She was glad the boys were bonding with their father, but it was still hard to let go of the protective barrier she had built around them. They'll always need you, Emma, William said, as if sensing her hesitation. No matter what happens. I know, Emma replied softly, and for the first time, she believed that too. Life was starting to fall into place for Emma. Her marketing firm was thriving, and she was slowly building a reputation for her creativity and work ethic. It wasn't easy balancing work and motherhood, but Emma had found a rhythm that worked for her. One afternoon, as she sat in her small office, surrounded by stacks of projects, she took a moment to reflect on how far she had come. From the heartbreak of being abandoned on her wedding day to the intense custody battle, she had weathered every storm. And now, standing on the other side, she was stronger than ever. Jessica, her closest friend and business partner, popped her head into the office. I just got a call from a potential new client. They loved the campaign we did last month and want to work with us again. Emma smiled, feeling a surge of pride. That's great news. You're doing it, Em, Jessica said, her voice filled with admiration. You've built something amazing. I had to, Emma replied, her voice soft. For the boys. For myself. Jessica grinned. Well, you should be proud. You've earned every bit of this. As Emma looked out the window, watching the world outside, she realized just how true those words were. She had built a life on her own terms, and there was no going back. One evening, a few weeks later, William showed up unexpectedly at Emma's door. His expression was serious, but there was a vulnerability in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. Can I talk to you for a minute? He asked, his voice quiet. Emma hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Sure. They sat down at the kitchen table, the same place where so many difficult conversations had taken place over the years. But this time, there was no tension, no anger. I wanted to apologize, William said, his voice filled with sincerity. For everything I put you through. I was selfish and I made a lot of mistakes. Emma looked at him, surprised by the raw emotion in his voice. William. No, let me finish, he interrupted gently. I should have been there for you and the boys from the start. I shouldn't have let Vivian, or the business, come between us. I hurt you, and I hurt them, and I'm sorry. Emma felt a lump form in her throat. She had waited so long to hear these words, but now that they were finally being spoken, all she felt was sadness for what had been lost. I forgive you, she said quietly, but it's going to take time to heal. William nodded. I know, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. For the first time in a long time, Emma believed him. There was no going back to the way things had been, but maybe, just maybe, they could find a new way forward. A few weeks later, Emma stood at the edge of the park, watching her boys play on the swings. The sun was shining, and their laughter filled the air, carefree and full of joy. As she watched them, she felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. This was her life now, full of love, full of hope. It wasn't the life she had imagined all those years ago when she stood in that wedding gown, waiting for a future that never came. But it was better in so many ways. William showed up a little later, as he often did on Sundays. The boys ran to him, their faces lighting up with excitement. Emma smiled, watching them from a distance. Things weren't perfect, but they were better. They were healing. As she sat on the park bench, watching her children and their father play together, she realized something important. She didn't need a partner to complete her life. She had her boys, and that was enough. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a message from Jessica about an upcoming project. Emma smiled, knowing that her future was bright, both as a mother and as a businesswoman. She had fought for this life, and now, as the sun set over the park, she knew that whatever came next, she and her boys would face it together. Because in the end, they were a family. And that was all she had ever truly needed.